Thank you very much for this introduction. Thank you to all of those who are participating and listening to us right now. These are, I don't know how to describe this particular moment, aside from extremely emotional, but also extremely revealing in terms of the nature of the fight that is ahead of us. I've been trying to articulate in my mind how do we understand this moment as Palestinians, as particularly as people from Gaza. And I feel that the best way to put it is that this, keeping in mind that the genocide is not of our own doing, and it would have been undone regardless of the kind of Palestinian action or reaction to it. And it was an already, kind of pre-made decision by the Netanyahu government and by the Biden administration. More importantly, actually, by the Biden administration, because it would have not been sustained or facilitated or justified or defended if it were not for the US government. Considering all of this, and that we Palestinians had no control over how Americans conduct their foreign policy, how Israel conducts itself, it is the best possible conclusion. And I don't want to be misunderstood here. I'm not saying that the killing of potentially hundreds of thousands, according to Lancet Medical Journal, we're looking here at about 6% of the Gaza population, potentially up to 10%, if not even more. That is not a good conclusion. But the fact that we had no control over that moment, the fact that we persisted, resisted, we have created a new paradigm for resistance that should be studied. That should be studied by everyone and applied differently to different environments. But we have discovered, thanks to Gaza, that we have width, we have space, we have margins to maneuver as oppressed people anywhere in the world, mainly in the global south, but even within struggles for equality and rights and liberation of various forms in the global north. We do have margins to struggle. And to prove that we have margin to struggle or margins to struggle and to fight and to win, as Gaza has indeed won under these circumstances, a simple proof is that even before the genocide in Gaza, Gaza has been under a hermetic Israeli siege. I think this is very important for people to remember, because a lot of people, including friends and comrades of Palestine, might not fully understand the dynamics that preceded October 7, 2023. Gaza has been under an Israeli occupation since 1967. Gaza has been under a constant and relentless Israeli war starting in 2008. Gaza has been under a hermetic Israeli siege 2006, 2007. Gaza had no freedom, no rights, nothing. Gazans were malnourished before the famine started. Gazans were unarmed and isolated before the war started and before October 7. So they did not start at a good advantage. They started, as one of the poorest places on earth, one of the most isolated, one of the most condensed in terms of population, and so forth and so on. So it started way behind, fighting not only against Israel, and again, this is important, but against the entire Western conglomerate. I know some Western countries tried to jump ship at one point. Many of them persisted, to their credits, supporting Israel and Zionism until the bitter end, even after the international community, the ICC, the ICJ designated Israel as potential entity that is carrying genocide and issued arrest warrants for Israeli leaders and all of that. Still, they persisted until the very end. Canada is one of them, of course, the United States, Britain, among others. But that said, almost on the first or second day of the Israeli genocide in Gaza, you had 5 major world intelligence units operating from inside the so-called Gaza envelope, helping Israel gather information and conduct its war, genocidal war against the Palestinians. I think they were the US, Germany, Italy, Britain, and I think Canada is one of them. I'm not certain about that. But here you have it. Gaza is fighting against all Western major powers in all of their military equipments, in all of their intelligence. And lots of information also was revealed that Americans were on the ground. Although the American government denied that, but we have some serious investigative journalism showing that Americans were in fact on the ground, including the particular massacre in Nusayrat, where they killed 271 Palestinians, wounded 800, and destroyed an entire neighborhood. And just for the record, that's my neighborhood. That's where I lived. Everybody in it was killed or wounded to save the 4 Israelis, and the Americans were involved in it. Yet, despite all of this, Israel has failed to achieve any of its objectives. No destruction of the resistance, no ethnic cleansing of Palestinians to the Sinai Desert, no dismantling of anything, no imposing permanent security control over Gaza. None has been achieved. Now they are trying to play with words and no, we are going to keep some, some buffer zones and not buffer zones. They can say whatever they want to. They achieved absolutely nothing. At the beginning of the war, I'm going to try to time myself here. At the beginning of the war, an ex-Israeli general or an Israeli general who served at one point in the Israeli army was in an interview with Channel 14, I believe, said he was asked to define victory and defeat. He said victory for the Palestinians would be a single child in Gaza City flashing the victory sign at the end of the war. We need to make sure that that doesn't happen. And indeed, they really did their best. I mean, they killed 16,000 children. They wounded a lot more. Thousands of them are still under the rubble. They did the best they could to prevent that moment. Now the entire Gaza are in the streets of Gaza flashing the victory signs. So even according to that psychological definition of the war, Palestinians have won. Moshe Viglin, a former contender for the Likud party membership, close ally with Netanyahu, turned against Netanyahu at one point, also said that what bothered him the most is that the fear factor, he said, which is interesting. He didn't say Gazans or Palestinians. He said, Muslims are not afraid of us anymore. Muslims are not, and that was for him the real crisis. They needed to have that fear factor. You can't tell me that Palestinians right now, despite of everything, they are living in fear. So there are so many obstacles that have been broken, so many issues that have been sorted out, and Palestinians emerge with this new spirit of victory that is unprecedented. And when I say unprecedented, I say it from a historical point of view. I've been helping my daughter do her finalize her PhD on Palestinian history and the British Mandate. And one of the books I'm helping her translate from Arabic to English is a book by a historian named Akram Zaiter, one of our very, very early historians about 100 years ago. And he talks about the fight and the resistance, the armed resistance, but the popular resistance, the strikes in Palestine in the early 1920s all the way until the end of the 1930s. And as I'm going through all of this text, I am searching for a moment, despite the proud history of Palestinian resilience and resistance and popular resistance, despite of all of this, I couldn't find from that moment until today, until this particular moment, few hours ago, a moment in our history in which we can actually claim an actual victory, an actual military and people's victory over Israel. The psychological impact of this are dire for Israel. And the psychological impact of this for the Palestinians is going to be generational and is going to be fundamental in changing the relationship between the Israeli occupation and Israeli apartheid and the Palestinian people, not just in Gaza, but everywhere else. This is the moment we are talking about. This is how history has been made. And again, back to the issue of margins. If Gaza has done this under with no resources, virtually no resources, and during a state of famine, who is to say that oppressed people in far more privileged. And I'm not trying to undermine the struggle of any nation. I am based in the US right now. And I know the kind of struggles, and I know the socioeconomic disadvantages of many oppressed groups and many minorities and so forth. And I've traveled many parts of the world, from South America to China, and I know the kind of struggles that exist in other parts of the world. But considering that the hardship faced by the Palestinian people, that is something that is really even difficult to describe by words. I think other groups are in a much more privileged situation in order for them to actually sustain a long-term fight with very specific goals and ultimately win. And we need to take advantage of this. Yes, we need to talk about the victimization of the Palestinians. Israel has to be held accountable. International law has to apply. We need an era in which we change the relationship between the application of international law and the rest of the world, especially in the global south. Yes, we do need that, but we cannot take this from the Palestinian people. We cannot steal their moment of victory and glory, not just for the Palestinians' sake, but for the sake of all of us. Because what happened in Gaza today means hope. When a small, isolated group of people win against the entire Western military conglomerate, anything is possible. I'm going to stop here.
I'm Michael Hudson. I'm appearing here for the International Manifesto Group. If you like this video and ones like it, please subscribe. For more information, go to the address on the screen.